Happy Palm Sunday. You know, I don't know if y'all have thought about this, but I've often wondered why Palm Sunday? You know, I don't see a lot of agreement, but you know, Jesus had a pretty profound life, and on one thing he did was ride into Jerusalem on a donkey, and that became Palm Sunday. And you know, what about the other times? Like, well, after last Friday night, what about the time when they turned water into wine? You know, why don't we have Wine Sunday or something like that? I mean, anyway, it struck me odd. I'm not gonna, well, maybe. I do want to thank people for last Friday night. For those of you who weren't here, it was a celebration of me turning 70, which both are shocking to me. And there were so many people involved, and I want to say thank you to those who helped put that on. It seemed to me at the time, though, that one of the things it really was a celebration of this church, not just of my age, but of the church, of the fact that we have a community that's strong enough to come together on their own accord without anyone really prodding them or me paying them, and put days into preparation, weeks actually, and to make food that was outstanding, decorations, presentations, dances and music. It went on, and it was so close to embarrassing for me that I almost blushed, but it didn't happen. I think I was just incredibly overwhelmed, though. And I want to thank those who had every part to it. And I'm looking at the names. There must be 20 here that I should remember. But if y'all will forgive me for not doing that again, just know that I really, really do appreciate it. And I thank you very much for that. One of the things that was said, if I can bring this up, one of the things that was said was a toast that was given. And the toast comes from Saint Exupery, who wrote The Little Prince. And he wrote this: if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. And it struck me that that's all I do on Sunday. I don't tell y'all how to do anything. I definitely don't know how to do the church like the staff does. The volunteers here are what have made the church work. I just get up and talk about the endless sea. And with that, y'all go off and build a ship. And so I really want to thank you for picking up the dream of having a spiritual community and making it so. So thank you. Now, one of the things we're going to do in the next week, Mimi, who has been ill, but she still put together the last words of Jesus and a commentary on it that you can tune into every day. That comes on every day. And you just go to the website and check the blog for that. And we have a Good Friday service, which I don't know if you weren't here last year, you may not remember that we had the singing bowls, and we'll have communion. It will be one of those really special things, and it will start at 7 o'clock at night. And I encourage y'all to come. It won't be anything like our normal service, but it will be quite strong, I think, and really worth your time. And then on Easter, we're going to have a potluck, which is a very Christian tradition, dating all the way back to the first century. The first century, the meetings that they had in the Christian church were potlucks, essentially, and most of the people didn't have much, so it was sometimes a stone soup, but it was the bringing together of what we had so that we could share among everyone, so everyone would have enough. And I really encourage you to be part of that, and if you can help, Reese Dolan's going to be outside collecting names of people who help. Reese, you want to stand up so they can find you? when they go outside, go see Reese. This is going to be, it's always fun to be part of the in crowd that put it together. So thank you, Reese. And then one thing that I'm really happy about is we've been doing meditation Mondays, and on Monday nights at 7 o'clock, we meditate. And we meditate for about 30 minutes. And then we have a little cookie and a little bit of conversation afterwards. But it's a sweet way to renew your heart, which is, it's not always the easiest time for everyone. But it is the beginning. We're also, one of the things we're doing here, just as we're doing at 10 o'clock 10:30 on Sunday mornings, is we're doing a heart meditation, which sets the atmospheric conditions for the church. It's part of building the community, is setting the energetic stage for everyone to come in and to feel their best and to allow their hearts open enough to forgive and to renew. And so I encourage you to be part of the Sunday morning and come on Monday nights if you can. I really think it's part of building community, and you can do it without getting your fingernails dirty. So please consider that. Easter is a perplexing time, I think, for me. There's a quote by H.L. Mencken, which might explain my problem. He said, "Church is a place where gentlemen who have never been to heaven brag about it to persons who will never get there." Easter is a place where we talk about Jesus as though we know what he was all about, as though we understood. And one of the things that's happened over the last 2,000 years is there's been a lot of theology that has been made up to explain the conditions that happened around the Easter time. And we basically said that starting a long time ago, starting with Paul actually, the concept that Jesus died for your sins, that's why he died, that becomes the reason why he died, why he lived, and all of that basically there is something wrong with you, and without Jesus, you are never going to make it to heaven either. Now, I personally think, and I maybe will be struck by lightning by the time I leave here, I believe that the church in the Middle Ages found that a very powerful statement and indoctrinated people in the thought that there was something wrong with them, and that because there was something wrong with them, they really needed the church to save them. And the church was the only avenue, because the church was the only avenue to Jesus. So that doctrine became culturally ingrained in the Western civilization and in many of the places that the Western civilization colonized. And that may be true. But it may not be true also. It may not be true that there was a God, or there is a set of conditions that require someone to sacrifice so that others may live. It may be. Now, much of that tradition of having someone sacrifice, something be sacrificed so others may live, comes out of cultures long since gone. Cultures that were just experimenting with planting, and they were realizing that if they planted something, it died in the earth and was reborn 100 times over as grain. And it became part of the internal mythology that humanity has incorporated and been part of. Or maybe they were a hunter culture in which they saw that death of another, the animal, was important for their life. But is it really a spiritual principle that someone has to die so that you live? I'm not sure. And so it's not something that we talk about here very often, or I ever profess as being the condition for your salvation. Because first of all, I don't think you need to be saved. I believe there's something intrinsically good about people rather than something intrinsically bad. And I have come up with a great theory to explain why we feel like there's something bad. I know you're on pins and needles to know why. Why this one would think he knows better than the church for 2,000 years, right? Well, here it is. And you can tell your grandchildren, you heard it here first. When we are in utero, when we're not yet born, we live in an oceanic experience of everything being provided and there being no problems particularly, nothing. We never lack for food or a place to sleep or anything. We don't have to do anything. We float along. All is well. And then one day we're born, which even in the best of those births, it's traumatic. It's horrible. For a baby who's had very little to worry about, now it's a life and death situation, being squeezed, pushed, prodded, and pushed down out of heaven into earth. Now, if that didn't make you think something went wrong, and if you're like most of us, we start looking and we go, well, it must have been me that did it. You know, they say children believe everything that happens in the world, babies, children, believe everything that happens in the world is about them. So of course it was their fault. So of course there's something wrong with them to have gone from heaven to this very harsh conditions that they were born into. If that's your native first thought outside the womb, and why wouldn't you believe that there's really something wrong with you on a spiritual level? That somehow you had failed, you had fallen from heaven, you had fallen from grace, and you would need somebody to redeem you. There it is, folks. The answer for the ages that we were waiting for. So now, let's consider that the story of Jesus is really more the story of us rather than the story of one person at one time, never to be repeated. Instead, it's really a story about us. That essentially we have these highs and lows. We began going into Jerusalem and everything is going our way. We've had a fairly successful 3 years of ministry. We have turned water to wine, we've made the lame to walk, and we can make the blind see. And people are flocking around us because they love us, in part because they expect to be fed like the 5,000, or they expect to be able to have something heal them, but they basically come to us for answers and solutions, and they really want to have a full and happy life, and they think we might have the way to it. This is going very well. And with that, we walk into Jerusalem. Now, haven't you had those moments? Maybe you've had years like that. Maybe you were the golden child, maybe you were not, but somewhere along your life, there was a time when everything was going your way. And it may be, at this moment, that seems like such a distant story that it can't even be you, but probably not. Probably for most of us, you can remember when it was going well. Maybe you won the spelling bee, or got a new bike, or your first girlfriend, or you left home and you were accepted in a new place, but things were going your way. And then something darkened that beautiful path you were on, and things fell apart. We come into Jerusalem, into that happy place in our life. We come into it often with the innocence of, this is the new me. This is the new life. This is it. I'm here forever. It's going to work this way. This is how I thought it would be, right? With that, we get married. That's a joke right there. Then we get married, and all that stuff we thought we had left behind walks in across the threshold with us. And we play it out. And it becomes a learning experience for us. We have a chance in those committed relationships to do things that you cannot do otherwise, because now you have committed to sticking it out to find the gem inside the mud of normal relationships. So you express yourself, and you are expressed too but you don't let it destroy the relationship. You keep at it until you find the pearl of great price. You do that. Or you don't, and then you do it again. Either one. It's just the way of it, right? And to think it should be different is to imagine that marriage is like a pre-birth experience in which everything will be there. Or to imagine any part of this plane that we're on right now, this post-birth experience is going to be all that easy. It's not. And many of us go seeking solutions to make it easy by becoming spiritual and thinking that if we're really spiritual, if maybe we pray every day or read the Bible or give to the poor or do something, that we will avoid the trauma of the rest of our life. And that seems to be not true. You may, but you may have done that anyway. I don't know. Some of us have a very hard time. Some of us are experiencing excruciating things at this moment. Some of us have in the past, and many of us will in the future. Think of Ukraine. They thought they had it together. They had gotten over Chernobyl. They were putting it together. Everything was going their way. And now where are they? Right? People who experienced the tornado, were they expecting that? This world is tricky. The reason we hope that we can avoid it is because it's unpleasant to be part of it. And the question really works out to be this: how can we take that which is difficult and turn it into something beautiful? How we can take a crucifixion and make it into an Easter experience. How do you do with what you have been dealt to make your life stronger, better, to be more compassionate, more full, more whole, to be more than your losses, and certainly more than your successes? How do you do that? And that's where the spirituality can actually kick in, because then it takes what's been happening and substitutes the outer successes with inner wisdom and personal transformation. And many of you know quite clearly that your biggest losses have led to your greatest developments as a human being. That without those losses, you would have gone on way too much like you were before. And most of us, I don't know if it's true for all of you, but for me, I can always say the only thing that has ever caused me any real grief has been my own behavior. So something had to change. And not unlike a car doing 115 miles an hour down Glenwood Avenue, something's gonna change. Until you come into your wisdom, and sometimes after, life will continue to knock at your door, first with a light little rap, and finally with a 2x4 up against the head, until you get the message. And even then, you will not be protected from no other hurt, because there's just more out there. I was reading a passage about a man who, this was a preacher talking about his father-in-law. And he was so proud of his father-in-law because his father-in-law was a little boy. He was picked on by bullies. And then he went and got those exercises in the back of magazines back then, you know, where you can, Charles Atlas, right? And he got strong enough, and then he beat up the bullies. And this preacher was saying, I'm not that brave. I would always just find a way to go that I didn't have to run into him. So I reveled in his stories about beating up the bullies. Now this man, who had been once really strong and quite muscular, developed a disease in which his lungs began to fail, and with that began to fail all his physical strength, and his muscularity disappeared, and he could barely breathe. He had like 5% of his lungs that were working, and he was wasting away slowly. And the preacher was sitting with him, and he could barely talk, this man. But the preacher asked him the question. He said, "So, tell me, what has these last months been like for you?" And though he had barely spoken for a long time because it was so difficult to breathe and speak at the same time, he said this: "It has taught me patience. It has taught me humility. All my life, I had failed to learn these, and now I have." And the preacher realized that his arrogance, his pride, his desire to hear those stories about him beating up the bullies was now trumped by this story of deepening wisdom by someone who couldn't even lift both arms at the same time. That there are spiritual lessons that we really only find in defeat. That we can only celebrate some high qualities about being a human being only after we have lost something we thought was precious. And we will all lose, so we'll all have a chance to do that, to take that which has been missing, tragedy, a sadness, and see what gem of great price is in there. What can we use from this experience to deepen ourselves in wisdom? And even though that may come with plenty of hurt, grief, what is it in there? There are two ways of doing losses, or maybe more. But two possible ways is to dwell on the losses as though they're only losses, or to dwell on losses as though they were a gift that you haven't discovered yet. Not to be Pollyanna about it, because the grief that we experience and we let ourselves experience is part of the deepening. So you can't do this process. I don't think you can do the process by the little quip, "It's all good." Because sometimes it ain't. It just ain't all good. But to live through it, rather than trying to skate over it, is how we come to the purification or the refinement of our soul, and we move into a new state. So there's a couple of other things I should add. Let me start by starting with this quote. Mark Twain: "I've lived through some terrible things in my life. Some of them actually happened." You know, Jim Valvano died about 30 years ago. He won the national championship 40 years ago at NC State when they had a miracle, and they won the national championship even though they were not the better team. But they won. And he ran around trying to hug somebody, right? That's what he was noted for, was this exuberance of happiness. And on his celebration of his life at ESPN, when he was speaking to the crowd, it was an Arthur Ashe thing. I don't know can't remember all the deals, but he said these three. He says, "Do these three things every day. To me, there are three things everyone should do every day. Number one is laugh. No matter, right? Laugh." I have been trying that lately, and I'm telling you, it really works. Laugh. Great thing to do. Number two is think. Spend some time in thought. Now, I know we make a lot about meditation not being about thought, but there's also this place for deepening. You only get there by really thinking about it. Do you know what I mean? Some traumas, some understanding can't just come about by living. You have to really think about it. You have to get down in the dirt with it and hang in there until that idea where you go, oh yeah, that's what it was about. Really think. Number 3 is you should have your emotions move you to tears. If you laugh, think, and cry, that's a heck of a day. Now, he died 4 months later from cancer. And he said this: cancer can take away all my physical abilities. It cannot touch my mind. It cannot touch my heart. It cannot touch my soul. And those 3 things are going to carry on forever. I thank you and God bless you. And those were his last big words on TV. We may never figure out what the gift is. That can be also part of the process. We might have the experience, but we might not have that pearl come clear to us. But the Valvano idea that you go for it, even as you're dying, you become that person who's in pursuit of the purification of their soul by deepening into the experience of what's there. And in that, you redeem the moment. And you do not need someone else to do it. You become the story of Easter itself. You redeem the moment when you give it your best to see beyond the trouble, the pain, the sorrow, the crucifixion, and find your way to resurrect. That's when you become the Christ of your life. The whole one, the complete one, the one who gave his life so that we might all live by your example. It is my hope that we can convert this idea that Jesus is the only exception, the only one, to the great example. Because we all have precious, valuable lives filled with potential. And if we can exercise the willingness to go through life looking, expressing, being the best we can, I think we too will feel like no one can ever take that beauty away from you. I don't really know how to do that. But I do know that I'll talk about the deep blue sea for you, and you'll figure it out. Let us pray. Start with the heart, and let the breath be focused in the heart so that we might expand that which is most generous in us, the place of love and acceptance. So the heart can transform the sorrows into compassion. The loneliness into a commitment. The sorrow into appreciation. The losses into determination. We have within us that which we need. Let Jesus be your example. move into this life with boldness, courage, doing your best, loving others with the grace of forgiveness, with the strength of knowing you belong to the one that is the one of all. Let us do that. And make every moment count by trusting, exploring, laughing, crying, and thinking, so that we might wake up one day and know it's all good. And so it is. Amen.
I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.